I am really sad to have to share this, but I wanted you all to hear it from me. Unfortunately, Hulu has decided not to move forward with Buffy New Sunnydale. I want to thank Chloe Zhao because I never thought I would find myself back in Buffy's stylish yet affordable boots. And thanks to Chloe, I was reminded how much I love her and how much she means not only to me, but to all of you. And this doesn't change any of that. And I promise, if the apocalypse actually comes, you could still beat me.
So that was actress Sarah Michelle Gellar, who was talking about how they decided not to move forward with the new Buffy reboot series entitled Buffy New Sunnydale. Very uncreative in terms of a title right there, which we'll get into in just a little bit. And a lot of fans, upon seeing Sarah Michelle Gellar so upset about this, ended up being angry at the executive that her and Chloe Zhao, who by the way is dressing in all black like a Hunger Games villain, saying that she's in a period of mourning over this series getting canned. And yeah, this caused a lot of people initially to be on their side and be very upset with the executives over at Hulu. However, we actually ended up getting a sample script of the initial pilot of this reboot, and after people have read this, after people have gone through this, they realized that Sarah Michelle Gellar is more blessed than she could ever understand, because if the show was going to go in this direction, it would be absolutely terrible in every possible way, woke garbage to the maximum, everything wrong with these legacy sequel/reboots that Hollywood keeps churning out time and time again. And yeah, it's actually incredibly embarrassing. In fact, so embarrassing that even Kotaku, again, Kotaku ended up saying that the script was terrible with a headline like this. An early script for Buffy the Vampire Slayer reboot leaked, and it's unbelievably terrible. And when Kotaku, of all places, is saying that this script is too modern, too woke, too nonsensical, too loaded with SJW nonsense, you know it was absolutely over the top bad, and we have the whole entire script for the pilot, and holy crap, this is one of the most embarrassing things that you can possibly imagine. And this is what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
When I created the show of Buffy, I had made the movie already. Well, I'd written the movie already, and the movie was designed to sort of twist horror movies and empower this young girl, but that's not the basis for a TV show, because that's just one story. So I spent a lot of time thinking about, well, what would sustain it, and that click of, oh yeah, High School was a horror movie. It was a horror movie of humiliation and isolation and power and cruelty, and to put that into the horror movie genre every week, there would be enough for, let's say, 7 years worth of entertainment where I could actually tell stories that meant something to me about my life and still have with the and the boo and the sex and the fun. It really made me realize that, when you're creating an ensemble, you need everybody to be in their own corner. It's like they're all holding, the blanket that the audience is going to jump into, and if they're not all in different places, the audience will not bounce. Then you must create characters who are naturally opposed, naturally individual, and then ultimately they always end up sort of fulfilling certain things.
So that was a clip of Joss Whedon talking about his creation, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and how it was very important for him to examine this as something different from his project, which was the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, in that he knew that he had to develop a character dynamic where every single character was in fact flawed, and their interactions ended up bringing them together or ripping them apart, because this is the foundation of a good television show. And if you actually watch the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer series, and then you watch the Angel series, which is a spin-off, one of the things that you'll realize is that if you try to hone in on the mythology or on how the magic works or any of that stuff, it's going to have some flaws, but you're willing to overlook that due to the fact that there are so many strong characters in the particular series. And again, strong in the sense that they're not invincible Mary Sue's. In fact, quite the opposite, in that they feel like real people. So this being Joss Whedon's creation, it only made sense for him to be the person at the helm of bringing it back, but of course, since Joss Whedon was canceled, they decided to throw him aside and instead brought in Chloe Zhao, who's the director of a couple of independent films and one of the least successful Marvel films, The Eternals. And yeah, obviously she is not going to bring the same strength in the writer's room, in my opinion, that Whedon brought. Also, in addition to that, if you read up on Whedon scandals, one of the things that you'll find out is that the man has a lot of problems with women, and for some reason, in order to be a feminist writer that's actually a good feminist writer, you actually have to hate women in order to do so. But guess what? In modern era, in current year, this is not what we do, so we have these over perfect characters that end up fulfilling these positions, while at the same time, you can't create something that is notable on its own. So what you have to do on top of that is vandalize a past IP, and this is exactly what this series aims to do. And even the title from the jump and the premise is a major problem, because the show is called Buffy New Sunnydale, but at this point in time, Buffy is going to be in her 40s. The Slayer is meant to be a teenager, and in addition to that, they are going to have a teenage Slayer that was named Nova, according to the script. But the fact is, while this sequel series could make sense had Buffy ended as originally intended in season 5, in reality, by the end of season 7, they broke the Slayer cycle, they activated all the potentials. Oh, and by the way, they also destroyed the entire town of Sunnydale, meant to symbolize that Buffy, and of course the story, was going to continue on, but separate from Sunnydale. But the fact is, this show is loaded up with stupid-ass member berries, so you have to bring Sunnydale back, you have to have a Slayer that is called at that particular location, and you have to retread all the old ground, introduce a new group of Scoobies that are no way, shape, or form going to feel as real and authentic and as interesting as the original group of Scoobies. And of course, Sarah Michelle Gellar is relegated to a cameo at the end of the script, as she's essentially getting the Luke Skywalker in The Force Awakens treatment, which is embarrassing in every possible way. But even more embarrassing is the fact that you have all these different people condemning one producer because he said that he didn't watch the series all the way through, he's not a super fan, and essentially what they're trying to do is say the production team behind the show, they're not big fans of the series, they don't know what's up with the series, but we, the writers and the crew and all of us, we're huge fans and we understand the series. When if you actually read the script, one of the things that you'll find out is that is anything but true. And I'll give you a perfect example of this as somebody who has not only seen this series, but has seen the spin-off series Angel, which by the way is fantastic and underrated. In fact, many of you have made comments on the fact that in certain videos on this channel, I'll wear a Wolferman Hart Law shirt. That is actually an Angel reference because I am a big fan of that particular show. But yeah, there's an end point of there where they're introducing Buffy, and she ends up working at some insurance agency, which again, not the most creative thing, and she ends up examining the damage that is going on in the small town of Sunnydale. Again, Buffy, who finished her story arc by leaving the destroyed Sunnydale, by leaving the Hellmouth, again, something that she was supposed to move on from, ends up back in the California area being an insurance adjuster looking at Sunnydale. But she's also operating under a code name, and that code name is Anne, which is actually Buffy's middle name and a code name that she used, I believe, in episode 1 of season 3 after the fallout of the events of the end of season 2. So this is meant to be a reference for you guys out there in the audience to say, hey, look, the writers wrote the series. One time Buffy operated under the alias named Anne when she was in Los Angeles for that one episode. Aren't we so in touch with how the series was written? Aren't we super fans? We really know what's going on here, when in reality, in actuality, using this as her alias shows that you did not understand the episode in which this name appeared, because I actually watched the series. I actually understand why she was working as a waitress in Los Angeles under the name Anne, and this is because that episode was all about the fallouts of season 2, where she did not want to be herself after killing her boyfriend. Again, you guys just watch the series. I'm trying to be as, vague as possible, but trust me, it makes sense within the context of the series. And in that episode, she finds another blonde girl who is jumping from identity to identity, who is upset about her boyfriend who is missing, and that guy also ends up turning up dead. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but this is what we call symbolism, and also this is something that we call a narrative device in order to develop our main character by having her help solve the problems of somebody going through exactly what she's going through for one particular particular episode. So anyway, throughout the events of the series, Buffy ends up getting revenge on behalf of this particular girl, and through those events, she ends up deciding that she is going to be Buffy again, but she leaves the name Anne behind and actually gives it to that girl, who continues to be Anne as a reoccurring cameo character throughout the Angel series, which takes place in LA throughout its entirety. And yeah, that girl ends up becoming Anne, and obviously Buffy is never to become Anne again. She is setting that aside. That's the whole point of the character arc of season 3, episode 1, where she is no longer Anne. That's the title of the episode, and yet the showrunners behind this particular show don't get that. They don't understand that. They just go for the cheap reference without understanding, again, the context of which that originally existed. This reminds me of when I watched a clip of Dragon Ball Super where Vegeta ended up doing the move that he did against Majin Buu, where he ended up blowing himself up. However, in this particular episode, Vegeta did not actually blow up, and then the characters end up explaining that the reason why he didn't blow himself up this time is because he actually learned control over that particular attack. Now, to me, when I watched this, I was blown away by how stupid this concept was, because the whole idea of Vegeta blowing himself up to kill Majin Buu was to seal his redemption arc that had been building since the Saiyan saga, and what Super ends up doing for a cheap reference to that is recreate it without any of its emotional weight or original context, and then they try to retroactively make what Vegeta did back in the Buu saga the symptom of incompetence rather than a deliberate sacrifice where he blew himself up because, again, he realized that he cared about his family, he cared about the Earth, and he had become a defender of the Earth. Now, Dragon Ball Super is notorious for this kind of thing. In Resurrection F, Piccolo ends up sacrificing himself for Gohan in the same way that he did during the Saiyan saga, and yeah, it's just not the same emotional weight. You're just trying to get a visual member-berry similarity between the two without understanding the original context, thus showing me you don't actually understand the property that you're actually writing for. And it's so crazy because when people are like, remember this, remember that reference, remember this from the original show, I want to respond to them by saying, do you remember? Do you remember the context in which that originally occurred? Because obviously you don't, and you're the writer on the show. I'm just a person who saw it when it aired, but for some reason, I can remember this way better than you can, and that is absolutely troubling. Now again, if you wanted to do a callback that actually made sense, that wasn't specifically a name used and left behind by the character, which shows that you don't understand the usage and the point of that name in the episode, you would actually use Joan as the code name, which is from the episode Tabula Rasa, which is an episode where Buffy ends up forgetting her entire identity along with everybody else in the main cast, and they end up having to come up with names on their own, and this is the one she chooses for herself, not knowing anything about herself. But you know, that would be a reference that made sense within the context of the universe that you're actually writing in, but what do I know? I'm just a bad man-baby fan who doesn't understand the writing of the show, even though, again, I clearly understand the writing of the show significantly better than the people behind this that are just looking for things to do member berries about. But it gets worse than that, because when they say on Kotaku that this is modernized to the level of an SNL sketch, they are not exaggerating. There are characters that are described in the script, vampires that come up from the ground, as wearing clothes that might indicate that they're possibly female, but of course, we're never going to assume genders because that's absolutely terrible. Now look, somebody will respond and say Buffy was always a feminist show, it was always woke, and yes, while that is true allegorically, as the show follows a girl growing up into womanhood, in reality, every time they had actual sexism in the show, like people disrespecting Buffy because she was a girl, those were the worst episodes, the most ham-fisted episodes, and in fact, those were the episodes that made the least amount of sense in universe, because in universe, people should understand that yes, a girl is the one that becomes the Slayer, that is how it works, and they shouldn't just be dismissive for no reason, because in the context of the universe, that makes no sense at all whatsoever. Now, the allegorical sexism stuff definitely worked. The Watchers Council happens to be a group of British men that withhold knowledge from the Slayer in an effort to control the Slayer because they want to be the masters over her power, and Buffy has to actually rebuke the Watchers Council as a part of her arc of growing up and not listening to what is perceived to be unjust authority. Again, allegorically, that is her standing up to the patriarchy, if you will, but it's not explicitly stated that they're the evil white male patriarchy, the evil British patriarchy, like it is in this particular series. There are, in fact, lines in this series about girls wanting a guy to stand up for them, and he says, oh, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to step on your toes. You don't like it when I deem your light. And then the female character ends up responding with, oh my God, you always try to weaponize my own feminism against me. And again, these are lines that would never be in the original show. In addition to that, there's also dialogue that references like TikTok slang, and it's absolutely embarrassing. And again, shows me that these people don't understand the original series, because while the original series is dated in a lot of ways, the slang and the terms used by the characters is not one of those ways, and I'll explain why. So we go to the Kotaku article, and they highlight the fact that they're using terms like unalived and all sorts of embarrassing things, again, from TikTok in the actual dialogue in the most embarrassing way possible. And this is because Chloe Zhao is completely out of touch with how the youths talk, so she's trying to write in a way that fits in with them. But unlike Joss Whedon, who is a much more superior writer, superior showrunner to her, who understood that no matter what they wrote, as older guys, they were not going to capture the voice of the youth, it wouldn't make sense. So Whedon actually developed what he called Buffy speak, which is the way that the kids talked in the series, which was slang that was made up, fits in universe, and thus could not be dated.
Making it feel fresh and kind of young, while at the same time not making it feel dated. A lot of people think that what we do is sort of hang out and listen to teenagers and take stuff from the way they speak, and we really don't. We make it all up.
We love language, and we don't hold anything back, and it's a really nice liberty that we have.
What that means, though, is that when you're writing, you have to constantly think about, how can I turn this phrase a little bit?
I'll think of the straight line to say, the line that gets the intent across, and then I'll figure out what's the flippy way to say that.
This show would have been dated a minute after it came out, maybe even before it came out. It's dated in the script because the way that people are talking is using the modern slang at the time of the writing that, again, changes so fast, becomes irrelevant so quick, and it totally misunderstands the concept of the original series, because this is something that they've been doing correctly back in 1997, and it's why you can watch this show and you're not going to hear phrases and whatnot that just don't fit in the modern era. Also, the issue of political correctness has been featured in episodes of the original series, very famously in an episode called Pangs, but again, throughout the course of the series, there were complaints from people that they relied on stereotypes and whatnot in order to establish the lore. The first Slayer was actually created by a bunch of African witch doctors. They ended up making the Black Woman Slayer rather demonic with the infusion of the power, and a lot of people were very angry looking back and saying, oh my God, this is so dated and racist and terrible. And that's not even to mention the fact that Angel ends up being cursed with the soul due to a gypsy curse, because you know those darn gypsies, again, also considered to be unbelievably offensive by your modern woke audience. But there's an episode, again, called Pangs. I believe it's from season 4. It's the Thanksgiving episode, where the characters end up becoming obsessed with political correctness, and it actually hampers their ability to do their job. Again, a great allegory for the writing staff behind this new series. And essentially what happens is that a Native American spirit or demon, doesn't really matter, is released. He ends up trying to kill people as revenge for the loss of his tribe, but simultaneously the kids in Sunnydale are in school learning about how white people bad, conquistadors bad, the natives were the victims. So you actually have characters not wanting to fight against the villain, trying to reason with them throughout the whole course of the episode, because they're like, oh my God, we feel so bad for you, you're the victim, even though, again, this guy is actively killing and cursing people, including people in the main cast. And all this comes to fruition when they have a character that is actually supposed to be the evil character actually answer the question about whether or not you should feel bad based on the fact that you have demons that are, again, from oppressed civilizations. Let me play you that clip right here so you can get the point.
Yes, he's been wronged, and I personally would be ready to apologize, but
Oh, someone put a stake in me.
You got a lot of volunteers in here.
I just can't take all this mamby-pamby boo-hooing about the bloody Indians.
The preferred term is...
You won, all right? You came in and you killed them and you took their land. That's what conquering nations do. That's what Caesar did. And he's not going around saying, I came, I conquered, I felt really bad about it.
Yes, correct. 100% factual right there. This white guilt, this pussified reaction that people have that basically is an example of suicidal empathy way back in, I guess, 2000 when this season ended up airing is described absolutely perfectly by that character right there. And yeah, the modern Buffy could never. Buffy Welcome to Sunnydale or New Sunnydale, whatever the hell this stupid ass series was called, could absolutely never match the cleverness of the original series, could never match the cleverness of Whedon's writing. The dialogue in this new script is absolutely trash, and the reason for that is, again, you don't have the original creative mind behind it. You don't have the actual trauma of somebody who grew up in a hellish experience in high school, who was a nerd, who was relentlessly bullied, who ends up putting that on the page in order to make compelling television drama. So yeah, I'm glad they're not going to get to bastardize this particular series now. Maybe they'll come back in 5 years and do it again later. And by the way, that's also not even mentioning the fact that the original Buffy series had working stuntmen, so did Angel, by the way, every single week of the show. And that's one of the reasons why the action sequences in those original series actually hold up so well to this day, because guess what? It's not dated with the CGI at the time. They actually have stuntmen working every single episode in order to bring that show to life, and a modern reimagining of the series would definitely over-rely on CG and just be embarrassing and not even match the aesthetic of the original show. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Buffy New Sunnydale being slain. Jokes, 10 out of 10. Till next time.